Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We welcome you all to our very first webinar. My name is Azka Marzuk and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's event. We are excited to have you all here as we embark on this new journey of learning, sharing, and growing together with Ilmbook. So, just a disclaimer before we start. Ilbook facilitates this webinar, but the views expressed are the presenter's own. We encourage independent judgment and seek professional advice when we need it. Okay. So next, where we have housekeeping items where we dive before we dive into, I would like to go through that a bit. This webinar will be last for 1 hour, concluding with 10 to 15 minutes Q&A session. We encourage you to interact with us throughout the webinar. Feel free to use the chat box to share your thoughts and comments. Please remember to be respectful and polite when addressing our guest speaker and other participants. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the box as we all have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as we can. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Marriage, a relationship that outlasts the temporary life of this world. Marriage is strong when each spouse plays their part. It's clear that what the female is designed for isn't what the male is designed for. And what the female is designed for, what the male is designed for, the female isn't designed for. Both have different complementary roles, the one necessary for the other. So, what are the spouse role in marriage? How can we fulfill our responsibilities? Who is our spouse? What are the blessings behind the marital life? And many other questions that we have. Therefore, today we invited our special guest to answer these questions, who is currently working as a family and marriage counselor with over 2 years of expertise. She has worked with individuals from all walks of life. Her background includes extensive clinical training and hands-on counseling, making her exceptionally equipped to provide deep insights and practical advice. Let's all warmly welcome Sister Razana Ramzy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Razana.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sisters, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, I am really good. How's your evening is going on?
Alhamdulillah, very productive.
Alhamdulillah,
Am I audible?
Alhamdulillah.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very crystal
Okay.
clear. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. So let's dive into without taking much time of anyone. So I'm really into this topic. And the first question I'm really curious and wanted to know is, lots of couples know what they need to do, but how can they make it work in the long run? What are some good ways of couples to stay close and handle their responsibility together to avoid problems down the road? What we can do about it? What do you think about this?
Yeah, the question itself, like covering up understanding and the unique responsibilities. Usually, when it comes to marriage, couples they know their roles well. The primary responsibilities, a role of a husband and a role of a wife, how they have to fulfill their responsibilities, they know. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they when it comes to those tasks they fulfill it very in a challenging way, with the hardest way they fulfill it. So where do they fail? They fail in their hidden roles. So you can see in the screen there are a couple of points we are sharing it.
Yeah.
So first and foremost you have to ask, what do you really gain in this relationship? What is exactly is marriage is about? And what is your purpose and what is your ultimate goal in this
Mm-hmm.
dunya,
Mm.
and how you can gain what you really gain in this marriage.
Mm. Yeah.
So let me give you the simple answer and the easiest answer, and that is the more gravity in our life, our ultimate goal to gain Jannah, and
Mm-hmm.
how beautiful it is that you can gain your Jannah by being a wife.
Yeah,
in
true.
by being a wife and fulfilling your responsibilities as a wife, and you just go to Jannah just like that.
Yeah.
It may sound very easy. So, for example, now the participants, some are might be married and some are looking forward to get married. So, being a wife is not easy, but I would say it's a unique job, and it is fulfilling the roles of a wife is not easy, but it's worth it to gain the Jannah.
Mm.
So, when we see the primary roles, the heavy roles, the surfacely they know whomever is getting married, they know their duties and responsibilities, like I said. So
Yeah.
when it comes to hidden roles, like when you see the trusting each other when there is no hope. Now, when you see the spouses must understand their responsibilities and different to one another. They
Mm.
have their different roles and it's completely different to one another. Some are there in similar areas, but yet it's different. And they must give the space to each other to support to fulfill it. So when we see the trusting part, it takes a major role in a marriage, not only giving the trust. It's a where do you put that trust? Where do you deposit the trust?
Mm.
So these are the hidden roles of a spouse, especially when it comes to sisters, the wives. Their
Yeah.
tendency is very low to practice this. Trusting each other when there's no hope. That means trusting that you will be responsible for your actions. How many of us are taking accountability for our actions?
Mm.
When it comes to even if there's something is brought up at the wrong time, said with the wrong tone or in a wrong way. Sometimes your spouse is not vocal about it, but you give that trust to them, you will take accountability in that. And trusting that you will be receptive to each other's feelings. Even if you feel differently or it doesn't seem big to you, you hear each other out and want to understand it. Sometimes when you express it, your husband might look like very neutral. And you feel like, okay, I don't know whether he understood or not. But you yet sometimes they observe, but they don't say anything about it.
Very true.
But you have to give that trust to him that, yes, he heard me enough. And trusting that you both will follow through with your word. This is the major part in that in a marriage. That means you both will follow through your word is it's a simple form. You can say like you don't lie to your spouse under any circumstances. Most of the time when we see in a marriage, you tend to lie to convince your spouse for the moment's sake. You never do that in your marriage because then you have to pay a price to gain that trust again. And trusting that you will manage your responsibilities no matter what, not failing, not fulfilling. It's the balance part, the managing part. You
Mm.
give that space to your husband as well, that he will manage it. So you can't expect the perfect or you can't expect the 100% according to your expectations from your husband as well. But you know he will manage it too with his responsibilities. So you both operate as a team. You don't have to remind each other or argue about who does more because both pull your weight together as a team. So this is always there in the marriage every day, end of the day. Either one reminds the other, I'm doing more than you.
Mm.
What do you mean? So this shouldn't happen in a marriage. You give that trust, but you are not being vocal about it or comparing it.
Yes.
And trusting that you will both motivate to change for the betterment.
Mm.
Now, when your life hits a rough patch, marriage is a long term relationship. And you
Yeah.
know, it's not
Yes. True.
easy to live with the same person rest of your life, seeing your dark sides and the good days, and seeing the worst side of yours and handling those times as well. So when you see the rough patch in your life and when you go through a frustrated cycle, you have to give that space to your spouse and give that growth along with your
Mm.
spouse.
Yeah.
And the second component is like believe in each other during the hardest season. First of all, we have to ask ourselves whom we benchmark as our go couple, as our role model couple in our lives. Who? When you see our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam,
Sallallahu
this is there we learn from their wives. They believed in them, they believe in each other during the hardest season. How much we give that to our spouse, how much we give that trust when they lose to believe in themselves and we believe in them.
Mm.
This is the wife role we give it to that trust to our husbands. How much we can give that to them. When you see there was a time like when no one believed in Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Khadija radiallahu anha believed in him.
Yes, very true.
So nowadays we see other way around. It's all,
Yeah,
we see other way around. Even though the husbands are believe in it, we don't believe in it.
yes,
We say, okay, I
sometimes
don't
I
think so.
say.
You can do this. I don't think so. Oh, really? So what are
Mm.
the consequences? What are the pros and cons?
Mm.
We won't even tell. So to believe in each other during the hardest season, that means there are various of seasons you come across in a marriage. Especially you will come across with a financial crisis. That is a
Mm.
challenge. And when you lose a love, when you lose a loved one, or when you're migrating, or when
Mm.
you're parenting, etc. These are the hardest seasons. So it is a new to you as well as to your spouse as well. During
Mm.
these time, you make sure that you believe in your spouse while you face the new challenge and the unknown fear. And the other part is agreeing to disagree without insulting each other. This is another thing. Our tendency is very high when you're being very vocal about your opinion with your spouse, when you're sharing your opinions. You always want your spouse to agree with you or go
Mm.
with the flow and just do. So it's really difficult to accept that they are against our opinions.
Yeah.
Yet they have their complete different personality. Their thinking is completely different than us. And the situations and the topics are different, whatever we
Mm.
are talking about. So
Mm.
you should be able to agree
Yeah.
in a respectful manner to keep the disagreement without insulting.
Mm. Mm.
And when it comes to our sisters, usually we hear this part all the time. Be
Mm.
patient. And when it comes to there's a trial time, or most of the time, it always said that sabr,
Yeah.
be
True.
patient. So when we say be patient, some get irritated also. Why me? We are not asking anyone to be patient for the abuse. But yes,
Yes.
with the patience, Allah is there with the patience always.
Very true.
What if I say there's no patience in their areas in the marriage? Then that means like no tolerance in marriage. You cannot tolerate. You shouldn't tolerate this part in your marriage. That is the silent treatment. You shouldn't tolerate it. And being
Mm.
disconnected after an argument, that means like you don't give that space much, that silence to grow between you two. There's no tolerance in that. So
Mm.
there's no patience in the sense like you take your time to heal when you're hurt or when you're being hurt. But
Yes.
you make sure you repatch it and then you get back with your spouse.
Yeah.
You don't grow that space, that emptiness more in your marriage. You don't do that. And imagine you express after those empty eight times, like probably a couple of hours or half a day or one day. You don't much talk to each other. You have that emptiness. And then you patch things up and then you express your husband or you express to him that, okay, I really missed you this time,
Mm.
this empty time. Yes, I
Mm.
was hurt and I expected this from you, but yet I missed it. I missed you. I missed
Yeah.
our text messages or I missed our conversations.
Yeah.
That is the beauty in the marriage. You
True.
have to keep working on it each and every single time with building the trust. And these are the set small rulings you have to have it in your marriage. And when it comes to there are no tolerance areas, you can stick yourself in like to heal yourself and how to you can reconcile and how you can make sure that this won't happen again in your marriage in your time. You can work on that space to how to mend it. And the other part is like promising each other to apologize faster, own their mistakes and repair it. This is very, very important when you come in your marriage. Very, very important.
Yeah.
Because You won't promise yourself that you will say sorry all the time. And you won't promise yourself also, like, I will accept his apology under
Yeah.
any circumstance or whatsoever. Because this should be a like an etiquette in your marriage.
Mm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
people do make mistakes. Now, when
Yeah.
we have a relationship with our parents, how many times they fail to understand us? How many times we fail to understand them?
Mm.
Still, we have our upcoming shortcomings and everything with our parents. So
Yes.
imagine a person who was brought up in a different environment, a different personality, a different character, and we start up to have a long-term relationship, a sacred one, and we are living sake of Allah, and we are living together in a marriage, and then we are starting a family, or we already started a family with them.
Mm. Yes.
This part, promising each other to apologize faster and own their mistake and mending it. This has to be very consistent in a marriage,
Mm.
because marriage, this is the part you can hold on to that relationship for the long run.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a 1 month or 2 months, or it's not going to be a
Yes.
couple of years. It's going to
No.
be rest of your life.
Mm.
And through this, you're going to gain your journey.
Exactly.
So once you repair your mistakes also, now there are some couples we come across, like they say sorry to each other, and they just apologize it. They repeat the same mistake again. No. Once you repair it, you don't recall it, or you don't insult with the past. That is also should happen parallelly with this. So one has to understand, as especially with the sisters I come across, they always go along with the past scenarios and remind, even though sometimes the husbands, they would have repented it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have stopped those behaviors or whatsoever.
Mm.
Yet they keep on recalling it and reminding it just to rub it on them, or out of habit, or out of whatsoever the reasons. So
Mm.
please don't do that. Avoid it. Because this is, you have to keep practicing in a very refreshing way. Very, very refreshing way. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, this happened. I won't do it again.
Mm.
But yet, if it's happening, then you should know where to draw the line.
Yes.
And the finally, it's very easy. It's very, very easy as humans, especially when it comes to women. It's very easy for us to blame
True.
rather looking at the triggers of the spouse, because our expectations are high.
Mm.
We get triggered easily, but we don't accept our spouse's triggers also. So
Mm.
focus on the trigger rather focusing on the blaming area.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
sometimes they withdraw. They withdraw themselves instead of making an effort to fix it. So focus on the fixing part rather
Mm.
just giving up on it. And most of the time, we are very used to defend it, justify it. We don't acknowledge it. This is where we have to focus on. When it comes to the spouse, you don't justify. You have to acknowledge with your spouse,
Mm.
because that is your husband. That role is, what you're doing is a wife role with your husband. So it's
Mm-hmm.
always
Yes.
remember, you are the wife. You are seen as a wife.
Mm.
And yes, and you don't react. You always be vulnerable with your spouse, with your
Yeah.
husband.
True, sister.
So I hope I covered up certain surfacely these areas, because we have a very limited amount of time.
Yes.
We can dig
Alhamdulillah,
in
sister.
through if there's more time.
Yeah,
So
inshallah, yes. Alhamdulillah, I really like the way you said that we have to be for each other in our hard times, in any times, like accepting each other. Those points really mind blowing. And also, there is a Quran. I also like we are garment for them, they are garment for us. That is so
yes,
inspiring and giving more hope to move with the life when it comes to marital life, isn't it, sister?
yes, very true. Now,
So when it,
when you see
yeah.
this ayah, you can see all the other points come under this,
Mm.
what we mentioned already, the
Yes,
sub roles.
yes, true, sister. Very true. And when we were discussing the previous questions answers, It seems to be like that communication is key when it comes to fulfilling all what we discussed. So, what are some practical tips couples can use to talk better and solve problems more easily to have a strong marriage? What can be done, sister?
Uh, it's a huge vast area, like when you say about communicating part, because most of the time our women, our sisters are tend to like the tone of the voice. Some are very soft spoken and some are very like loud, and it's completely fine, the nature of your the way you communicate and everything. But mostly it's not the communicating how much you learn from resolving problems. Most of the time, the way you communicate itself escalate to another problem. Most of the time. Why? You forget when it comes to the wife's role, you don't treat your husband as your roommate or your
Hmm.
friend or
Hmm.
as just a known person. Or you don't treat him that way.
Yeah, true.
But it is always there
Hmm. Yes.
because you know the guy for a longer time and you know his dark side and the good everything. So you tend to speak just normal like that. But
Hmm.
you're always seen as a wife. Your role is such. Because, for example, now you can treat your friend as a friend. You can
Yes.
treat your colleague as accordingly,
Hmm.
whatsoever the social relationships you have or with the families, relatives.
Hmm.
Can you treat them as your spouse?
No,
Can you
definitely
treat
no.
them as your husband or can you treat them as your wife? No, you cannot.
Hmm.
Why? Because that is a sacred relationship and that role is very, very sacred. And when we see, when we mostly when we come across with these sessions, and primarily we see when the husband's complaints are like, she speaks, the way she speaks sometimes triggers me. The way the way she puts out the problem or the way she start up the conversation sometimes it really irritates me because they see you as their wife. So
Yeah.
they expect is the grace. There's no harm to speak gently and then speak gracefully. But there's another thing we always have to remember. Being vocal is not only communicating. Being
Hmm.
vocal and talking, that is not only communicating.
Hmm.
Your body language, your behavior overall, your gestures, your expressions, everything comes under that, the communicating part.
Hmm.
Everything. So imagine you speak to your husband gracefully and your body language, your expressions all the time very subtle and neutral. They will love to sit and listen to you at least after some time.
Exactly.
The big initial stage, they are in love and they are very attached to you. So why it's fading away later on? Because you
Hmm.
also very comfortable, like talk whatever you want or put it out the way you want. It won't work that way.
Yeah.
You have to work on your body postures, your body languages, expressions, everything.
Hmm.
And primarily you have to understand my behaviors, even when you're talking about something, a sensitive
Yes.
topic or
Yes.
when you want to make the hardest decision.
Yes.
Keep that tone and the pace and then be very neutral. Then you can have that gracefulness in your life and you can change your character to that.
Hmm.
That will definitely gonna give you more reward, and along with it it will give you how grace you are. In
Yeah.
Islam it says the haya, and
Hmm.
then the grace is more important to a woman. Especially there's a thin line between feminism and feminine. You
Yes.
have to ask yourself that how feminine you are with your spouse, with your husband. The more feminine you are, the more you can hold the bond stronger with your husband. Many times couples think they are communicating. Always they think like we are communicating, but they don't. They react to each other.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
their quick reactions leave them both feeling misunderstood or disconnected or disappointed
Yes.
because they react to each other. They
Yes.
don't talk. They think they are talking or having a conversation, but they don't. They just react. Even in the very strong marriages, also like that, still it damages when you react in the communicating.
Hmm.
And it's easy to forget you are in the same team when you're talking to each other. You quickly
Yes.
react and you go against each other. So this tendency comes because when you know the person too much for a longer run, you assume they're going to say this, or you
Yeah.
expect they accept you that way. So this misunderstanding happens. And
Mm.
especially in a marriage, your character, especially in the hardest time, your character will show how you handle your difficult times. Even during the hardest times, how you put it out, how you are being vocal, how your behavior is, that is where your character shows as a wife, especially as a wife. So once you master this in the good days, in the normal days, then you will be able to handle it in your hardest season.
Mm.
Like you said, now communicating and resolving problems. So when you practice this, now it is very easy to sit and talk any sort of a problem or
Yeah.
any sort of a during any sort of a crisis time. And always remember, sisters, like you always have a choice. You someday think I don't have a choice. Of course, you always have a choice. When it comes to specially communicating part, even though you are hurt, you will be able to sit and talk. That is where you master yourself
Yeah.
with your emotions. And you always remember you have can choose between two choices. You can always make a choice. You can either proactively communicate or reactively fight, go for an argument. Or you should be able to express how you feel, all your feelings, without taking out on them or without venting out on your husband. But you can still express your feelings, how you felt it, how much you hurt, and everything. And you must be able to apologize even though you are also hurt after the argument. That is where you can win. That is where you can win yourself in that area, in the sense
Mm.
like whatever
True.
the topic you are talking or whatever the conversation you're having with him. And first and foremost, you must be able to disagree without fighting. Then your partner will know, especially the husbands, they know what you really need and where you stand in your opinion. They
Mm.
will know because you're not losing yourself when you're having these kinds of difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And in marriage, it's like a portrait in social media. It's like overrated thing, and
Mm.
there's no happiness in there. It's always
Mm-hmm.
the boredom and
Mm.
always the problems and the
Yeah.
crisis.
Yeah.
Uh, is there any other relationship better than the marriage?
No,
No,
nothing.
there's not. No, there's no other relationship. So why it's portrayed that way? Because you always are very vocal about the problem,
Yes.
not the blessings, and you don't think the good days, and you don't appreciate the good days, and you don't see the goodness in the partners. You always focus on the negative. Once you see a flaw in your spouse, start googling, and then you see
Correct.
start labeling that fellow. So once you do that, you're already halfway away from your marriage. You
Mm.
don't think where can I rephrase it and how can I solve this problem,
Mm.
rather labeling your spouse.
Very true.
The hardest thing in the marriage is, like I mentioned it earlier, the apologizing part. It's very difficult, but yet you choose to apologize even though you're hurt, and you show love when you don't feel like being loved. Yet, that is exactly what's needed after the argument. But most of the time, women fail to do that.
Yeah.
It's they why they fail to do that, because they feel like it's they're losing. It's naive and it's not worth it. No. First, you take the initial step in this. Whom you're trying to please? Yourself, your
Uh,
spouse, or your creator? Once you
Definitely
ask that,
creator.
then you know the ones who start to seek forgiveness first, the ones who forgives first. That is where Allah stands with. So you ask yourself where you stand with that. This is very needed in a marriage always. But what you expect is your spouse to come first and seek forgiveness or say sorry or to acknowledge it. No, you take the initial step as a wife, even though it's
Mm.
right or wrong.
Mm.
Sometimes all you need to hear is a simple sorry. Sometimes you need to hear. But what happens was rather you battling it out and fighting over and over again. Once the either one of you say sorry. You don't even realize that you don't, you won't, you will completely forget regarding what you fought for
Mm.
because you want to hear that I'm sorry part.
Yes.
Sometimes those two words are not enough at all because probably those were said before and it was occurring again. Then you have to give that space to your partner to give that clarification
Mm.
that they won't do it again.
Yeah.
So in a marriage, it's apology is the beginning and mending and rebuilding the trust again. And what really needed in that, if you don't do it in consistent manner, you will lose it, that love, that trust, and the belief. And then where your marriage is at stake. So I
Exactly.
hope I covered it up like overall, rather
Yes.
pinpointing certain incidents.
Yes.
Um,
Is there
Especially when
something?
it comes to women as
Yes.
wives, they should understand that to give that space to the spouse and they should take the initial steps.
Yeah. True. True, sister. Very true, sister. The apologizing part that you said, it is the hardest part anyone can, even to the kids, to adults who finding it difficult to say sorry. Something that is we have to work on and bring it to practice. Maybe if we are not yet married, it is the high time to just start with the siblings itself, and also with the people we are around. Moving on, it's never too late. Even after married, this we can practice a better. I think, isn't it, sister?
Yes, because some when we're seeing in sessions and all, sometimes they bring it to the professional table. Until then, they have not apologized to each other.
Hmm.
That is
Yes.
not, they have not practiced for the long run as well.
Hmm.
Sometimes, most of the time, husbands, their tendency is very low to apologize. But what I see is nowadays men are ready to apologize. They don't mind it. But what they get irritated is after apologizing, being in the past,
Yeah.
repeating the mistake again and again and reminding it. Now,
True.
once you say sorry, you don't like to be reminded again and again. So
Yes.
you should,
Anybody.
a wife should know where to keep that balance.
Yes. Exactly.
So that
Exactly.
is what the resolving problem. Sometimes the problem escalates again and again because the
Mm.
way you handle things, even after an apology.
Mm. Yes.
So I hope that part is much. Uh,
Deep.
I
Yes,
hope the
sister.
participant understood that part. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's so really deep and something that we have to work on even before and after. It's like a long journey. Until that, we have to be conscious about it. So I have something really interesting question for you, sister. For
Mm.
this question, your advice is vital for us. Here we have the participants who are already married, some are yet to marry, some are figuring things out yet. So the question is, what can couples do to balance their own needs with their partner's needs and create a happy marriage? What can be done?
Actually, it's a very good question when it comes to marriage part. When you see like 3 to 4 decades ago, women are not career oriented. They are not career oriented. But nowadays, sisters are career oriented also before the marriage.
Mm, yes.
So if you are career oriented before the marriage, you have to ask yourself, are you balancing yourself with your career? Because when it comes to marriage, you can't expect to, your husband has to tolerate this. You cannot expect that. No, will you tolerate just because your husband is working and every,
Mhm.
all the fulfilling all the responsibilities? No, you won't tolerate for the long run. So same
Yes.
thing when it comes to marriage, you can't expect your husband to tolerate. Yes, if there is off track, it's fine, but yet not for the long run. So if you're a career oriented or if you're studying now or not married yet, ask yourself, are you balancing yourself and then you're balancing your studies and your career? If you can balance it that, then you can look further when you're stepping into the marriage. Most of the time, our sisters fail to balance the spiritual side. That is their lagging most of the time, primarily. As Muslims, we should be able to balance our spiritual time along with your other responsibilities. Keep the marriage apart.
Mm.
If you should be able to balance that first, because then your husband won't step into the counseling sessions or he won't come and complain. She's not praying. I've never seen my wife is praying. There are
Mm.
husbands who complain that in the marriage counseling. They
Yeah.
complain that.
Mm.
So when you are in your spiritual side, when you are fulfilling your part
Mm.
as a Muslim,
Yeah.
then you're halfway done there. And once you're fulfilling your responsibilities with your career and everything, then you're
Mm.
balancing it out, then you are in the place. Because
Yes.
once you start your marriage, your role is there, you're volunteering, you're doing it, and you
Mm.
expect from your spouse as well. That means
Yes.
you have to take care of yourself and you
Mm.
have to fulfill the responsibility as a wife role as well.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
where you lose sometimes because most of the sisters, I really appreciate the one who supporting their husbands financially. May Allah reward you all immensely and may Allah accept you all completely with your hardest task. Because helping financially with your spouse, helping them, your husbands, to financially part. So that is a huge challenge for the sisters. Especially they have to balance themselves and then the house chores and everything as a wife, and then to do the extra also with the finances.
Yes.
Once when you do that, you fall into a cycle. By default, you fall into a cycle. Like sometimes you skip a meal, sometimes you come across with your moods and mood swings and all. And sometimes you go with the imbalanced sleeping pattern. This is okay for a shorter time period. It's completely fine for a shorter time period. Some, when they do after marriage, they start doing their degrees, masters, or
Mm.
whatsoever, or they want to establish more in their career or start up a business or whatsoever. So when it comes to these areas, like I
Yeah.
told earlier, like the hardest season,
Mm.
then you tend to go off track. It's fine when you go off track for the shorter time period, like
Mm.
you skip a meal or delay or your sleep, or you get minimal amount of sleep. It's fine, but make sure you bounce back to your track. If you don't do that, that is where the danger starts. You will pay the price with yourself first. You lose your sleep for a long time. That means for a week, for a month, for a consistently, or you sleep late and you wake up late, or you barely get a sleep during a nap or something during daytime, or you skip a meal once a day and it becomes like a habit. You eat only when you're hungry or your appetite goes, and then there the problem starts. You get
Mm.
angry,
Yes.
you're
Yes.
moody, then your psychological state goes other way around, and then you're physically, you come across with other diseases, then it collides with your emotions. So how are you going to maintain your role as a wife? Where are you going to vent it out? The one who's married to you.
Yes.
Then where you put it out everything, you deposit everything the other way around.
Mm.
So you don't realize this is happening because of the imbalance. You don't realize. You
Yeah.
start it out to put it out, yeah, blaming the partner or the blaming the other person, and you just justify it because you did everything for the betterment. Yes, of
Yes.
course you did. You always contributed and you put yourself, you were selfless, and then you did everything for the marriage,
Yeah.
for the betterment as a
Yes.
team. But
Yes.
yet it starts as an innocent mistake. It
Mm.
starts up as a norm. But yet the balance goes when you fail to focus and fail to conscious to keep on track. That doesn't mean, and there's a thin line between those two as well. That doesn't mean you have to be self oriented,
Mm.
completely self centered. No, it's not self centered. It's you have to focus on, keep yourself prioritized. Even if you go off track, you bounce back,
Yes.
checking. So you take a break. You tell, yes, of course, I did everything. Now for the last 2 weeks I did, and this is where I need a little break. I need 1 day break or a couple of hours break. You should be able to sit and be vocal with your husband. And then this is where you act smart. This is where you should be wise enough to balance. There are
Mm.
some sisters who work hard online base or physical, they work hard.
Mm.
But even though they provide financially with this balancing with the spouse, why do they end up in marriage crisis? They don't pray
Yeah.
and they fail to maintain their hygiene.
Yes.
They fail that part as well. It becomes they expect their spouse, their husband to tolerate it because I'm
Mm.
helping you in the major part.
Yes.
So you have to sacrifice me, you have to tolerate me in this part. No, you cannot expect that. You should be able because you're strong than you think you can. If you can do that, the only way you are losing it because of the imbalance.
Yeah.
So you should be able to balance that part.
Mm.
So one, if you could do this before the marriage, like I told you, like when
Yeah.
during the studies time, when you're starting up your career, and
Yes.
then you ask yourself if you're spiritually you are committed,
Mm.
half of the problem is gone.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
anyways you will maintain your hygiene, anyways you will focus on your cleanliness and everything, and then your sleeping pattern, everything will be on track. So when you are doing that part, the rest will fall in that order. I hope I cleared that out,
Alhamdulillah,
Sister
sister.
Aska.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. That was really a insightful presentation, Sister Razana. Thank you so much for the insightful session for us. We are really benefiting from this. We have discussed at the beginning like how to navigate ourselves through responsibilities and roles and unique kind of understandings where we never heard of and never unique like rarely spoken points, and also how to communicate with the husband, and then balancing our life with our marital life. Those are really unique topics that we have covered, and I'm really, really benefited. I hope our participants also benefited a lot. So it's time to move on to the Q&A session where you can, all the participants who are listening to us, it's your time to ask your questions. So inshallah, with the time that we got, we will try our best to answer many questions as possible. Um, so it's your turn, participants. Inshallah, this is your high time to ask your questions and get your answers. Inshallah. Y'all can use the chat box to submit your questions. Sorry, Sister Razana, there is a question that has come up. Can I just vocal it out to you, sister?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, dear.
There's a sister or brother, sister, I hope. How to face the problems happening from the husband's side, husband's family.
Um, if it's disturbing the peace between you and the husband, then you have to sit and vocal about it, how it's
Mm,
affecting your peace between your husband.
mm,
If they're interfering your personal space,
yes,
that is one thing. So she has not specified the problem. She's telling it's from her in-laws, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken. Yes.
yes.
So first you have to, like I told you, this is the hardest conversation you're going to have with your husband. So make
Yeah.
sure you don't insult his side of family members when you are being vocal about it.
Mm,
And you choose the timing wisely.
yes.
Most of the time, husbands they work outside and their chill time is at home. So when you're choosing to sit and talk about this kind of conversation, these kinds of problems, make sure you choose the right moment
Mm,
and you just address the problem, not insulting anyone in his side of the family, in-laws.
yes.
And
So,
if it's really damaging or if it's really erupting the peace between you two, then
mm,
you can be vocal. Or
yeah.
if it's something very deeper than that, then you can
Yes.
seek the professional guidance, inshallah.
Exactly, sister. And also, there is another question. How to handle an arrangement she has mentioned. I hope it's an argument, and how to turn it into a negative way. How to handle an arrangement and how to turn it into a negative way. Sister, can you, the sister who has posted that question, can you just rephrase it a bit? Then we can understand a bit the question, Allah. Okay, there is another question. Until the other sister rephrase the question, I'll just ask the next question that popped up. Is wife should support financially in Islam? Is it must?
It is not a must, it's a choice. If I'm not mistaken, it's
Mm-hmm.
better if you check with a scholar as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that has to be asked with a
Check with a
scholar.
scholar, yes. It's not a, if I'm not mistaken, you can check it with a scholar. It's a choice.
Yes. And there is another question. When there is a challenge and he says just have sabr, but you are feeling overwhelmed, how do you respond?
Sometimes you may be overthinking about it. If your husband is saying just have sabr, probably he's telling not to be vocal about it, not to keep repeating about it. Sometimes when you think it more,
Mm,
you're you sound like nagging to your husband.
yes,
So now the sister herself has said that it's overwhelmed. She's overwhelmed, right? It's
yes,
overwhelmed. So
yes,
that means
exactly.
it's probably she might be overthinking about the problem.
Mm,
So when the husband says just have sabr, don't speak about it. Whatever you did it or whatever it is said, just give some time
yeah,
and see what's going to happen.
inshallah. Inshallah. May
Yes.
Allah help us with that. And another question, how to handle arguments in a positive way?
Um, when it comes to arguments, you have to handle it first. Don't call with names. Don't label. And especially avoid raising your voice. Then it won't sound like an argument. And stick only to the point. When you're talking, just talk only regarding the subject. Don't go over the subject. Then it won't escalate to an argument. You can't turn an argument into a positive. You can balance it out rather to escalate to another another argument. And make sure you don't entertain even they insult you or when they would call out your names or whatsoever, you don't answer back. That is where you can control it. So those are the positive tips for the moment. And
Mm-hmm.
primarily, when it comes to an argument, it always blends with more emotions and more aggression and very. You put it out. You have the tendency is very high to vent it out. So
Mm,
make sure that your emotions are not escalated. You don't give what the other partner is asking for. Now you feel like this is going to turn into argument. You keep it in your mind. No, I'm not going to make this an argument. I just keep it neutral and I'm going to just to stick it to the point which I want to talk.
inshallah. So another question from a sister. How do you navigate the emotional challenges during a marriage? Like if it is mentally draining you, you have to handle all one-handed. Even if you have communicated this many times and very, very politely, when you don't get the emotional support from your spouse, what are we supposed to do?
This we get most of the time when you keep repeating, like I explained earlier. If you
Mm,
see that it's happening again and again,
mm,
then there's something the way you are giving too much. For example, like you want that your husband to change certain behaviors and you keep telling it and they are being ignorant or you have to ask yourself, are they being ignorant or is he doing the way you are according to your expectations? You
mm,
have to ask yourself first that. If he's doing it yet not to your expectations, then that is not his problem, that is your problem. If he's not doing at all, then you have to ask yourself, okay, now I have repeatedly told him this, yet he's doing this. So what am I going to do? Then you draw a boundary. Then you have to be set some boundaries. Okay, if you do this, I am hurt and I don't, you have to set some boundaries. You have to give your, where you stand in those areas. Now,
Mm.
the sister has not clarified those moments or whatsoever.
Yes, yes, yes.
For example, like uh, the sister doesn't like when she finishes all the chores and after the dinner and when she's coming to bed, she doesn't like the husband to use the device. So when she sees the husband is using the device, she reminds, okay, don't use it when I'm around. And again, he's doing it again and again. Then she can set some boundaries.
Yes.
While I'm here, please don't use it. Keep it away. This is not going to give a good side for us. It won't. Anyways, it's going to be an argument. So you can set some boundaries. For example, so if there's any specific moments, then you have to just consult. If there's any hardest times or specific moments, so you can consult the marriage counselor or counselor and just get some tips in
Sure.
regards of this to clarify the situation. Because when you keep repeating the same thing again and again to your spouse and you expect them to change quickly, then you will get overwhelmed, you will get drained.
Mm.
So for further, then you can consult a professional, inshallah.
Inshallah. And also, another sister has asked, is it important always to be transparent in the relationship? Also, about the past of each other.
Uh, Usually, there is a saying, if Allah has covered your sin, why you are disclosing it? If
Mm.
Allah has covered and if you have repented,
Mm.
why you want to disclose it? Most
Yes,
of the time, these traits are from, especially from the Western culture.
yes.
They want to disclose it, their past scenarios to their spouse. And once you're married to your spouse, if you're doing something wrong in the loyalty or in the trust, then that is where you are a culprit. That is where you do go wrong.
Mm.
But in the past, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter in the sense it's your choice. Most of the time, we see when you have experience in the past and you disclose it to your spouse before the marriage, that after disclosing it, you will come across with unnecessary problem. First, the trust.
Mm.
They benchmark it. Okay, so and so with so and so in the past, or this there are certain things happened in the past. She might be doing this in the present as well with me, or he might be doing the present with me. So this will escalate to another problem after you
Mm.
disclose it.
Yes,
So even if it's better to not to disclose. If there's anything, even if you disclose it, then you have to prepare yourself to face the other what I mentioned.
yes.
So it's ideal not to. That doesn't
Not.
mean you're cheating. That doesn't mean you are lying to your spouse. It
Mm.
means you have done something and you have repented it, and Allah has sealed it.
Yes.
So you don't have to disclose it.
Yeah, very true, sister. So, inshallah, we'll take another two more questions, and then after that, we will conclude the session for today. Um, what's the advice you could give for a long distance relationship?
Mm, long distance relationship. Is it a marriage?
Yes, we'll take
Okay.
it as marriage.
Yeah.
Yes.
So be very vocal about how you feel about each other
Mm.
and be very vocal when you miss your partner. Just express it and prioritize your timings, your chatting time or connecting time. Prioritize that and try to be, yes, I could say, uh, make sure that it's for a betterment for as a team. Most of the time, the distance matters when they come across with a financial crisis. They go distant, they go abroad. One spouse is in one country and the other spouse they fly. So they focus on the bigger problem and they come across with the other problems afterwards. So then the marriage is at stake. So to maintain this, make sure you communicate very productively and you express your feelings very constantly and keep the doubting part aside. That doesn't mean you have to trust blindly, but don't doubt unnecessarily because the time frame is different, your workload is different, your Your emotions are different with the time lapse. So make sure that shouldn't affect your marriage.
So, sister, the last question for today. Is it okay to share my husband's or his family's negativity to my family?
It's not okay.
Yes, exactly right.
It's not okay at all because when you share it, you have to understand you will forgive easily your spouse, but not your family.
Mm,
You won't judge and you will overlook, but not your family. So when we see the marriage, when we do in Kasi cases or when we do marriage counseling, we see third party interference is such in a marriage.
mm,
So if you need to, if you really need to discuss it, then make sure it should be given as an amana. You choose a trustworthy parent or your sibling or whatsoever. And if ask yourself why you want to disclose it. That is the first question you have to ask yourself. To insult them or just to share a detail, then please don't. Make
mm,
sure you want to fix the problem. You really want to like to fix it, the whatever the existing problem. Then choose wisely a
yes.
trustworthy person, and then you disclose it. And make sure that person is also not being judgmental or being biased.
Mm, okay. So, Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Sister Razana, for
I'm
sharing
sorry.
your. Yeah,
I'm
sister?
sorry, Sister Aska. There is another question in the chat box. If I'm not mistaken, I can see like
Yes,
there
there
is.
are plenty of questions came
Okay,
up,
okay, I'm
sister.
sorry.
So, as we
Okay.
have limited time, so we have,
Yeah.
inshallah, they can just contact privately and ask their questions. We can maybe answer their questions back, inshallah. Is that okay, inshallah?
Yeah. Inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Any concerns or any questions further, you all can ask through the WhatsApp a number we will be sharing, inshallah, very soon at the end. Then you all can contact and maybe clarify your doubts, inshallah. So let me thank all of you all. Like, thank you so much, first Razana sister, for sharing your expertise and insight with us today. Your knowledge and expertise is family and marriage counseling have provided us with valuable perspective that we can all learn from. And also, I would also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to audience for your active participation and thoughtful questions. Your engagement is what makes this session so enriching. A big thank you to the Ilmbook the Ilmbook team for organizing this event and ensuring everything runs smoothly. Your hard work behind the scene is greatly appreciated. I would like to take this moment to talk briefly about who we are and what we are doing in Ilmbook. So let me give a brief of it. Ilmbook is a hub for providing comprehensive guidance on spiritual development, marriage, parenting, youth enrichment, and essential life skills. Elm's main goal is to enhance lives in every possible way. Therefore, with the collaborations with esteemed scholars, professionals, and institutions, we aim to equip individuals with transformative learning experiences. Before we conclude, I'd like to encourage everyone to stay connected with us. Please visit our social media and follow us to stay updated about our upcoming events. If you found today's session valuable, please consider sharing your feedbacks through the contact number which is provided on the screen or via Inbox social media platforms. Your input helps us improve and tailor our future webinars to better meet your needs. Jazakallah khair again for joining us today. We hope you found this session informative and engaging. Inshallah, let's meet you all once again with another insightful session. Until then, stay connected and keep learning. This is your moderator signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.